One of these days. One of these days I'll figure out how to get this right first time around. Anyway, okay. Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well. And I'm looking and geez, it's more than halfway through April. Can't I can't believe it. But anyway, moving right along. Um, Today I have a short quote that hopefully some of you may remember it. But in thinking about it, I decided that what I was going to do is kind of like talk about me and see whether or not some of what I have to say about this quote fits you. So this comes from Jennifer Roskamp, Roskamp. At least I'm guessing that's the way she spells her name. It's somebody I see periodically online, and one of these days I'll get around to giving you guys a link because I think she might be helpful for some of you. Anyway, she made the comment that you are not your circumstances. Your circumstances merely happened to you. And that sort of hit me at the date that I happened to see it because it was like, gee, that's what I was doing. And so as I'm thinking about this particular quote, to explain, and I sense what I think she means, in fact, well, she did go on to talk about this quote, so I know that this is what she meant, some of the things that have happened to me in my life and see whether or not you do the same thing. One of the first things I think is probably the earliest one. Well, yeah, I guess you could say it's the earliest one. It's the one one of the things I found recently that I didn't know happened way back when. But anyway, so let me get to the story. It's about, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. I somehow discovered that my brother had learned plumbing. And I thought, no, you learned plumbing? And he said, yeah. Now, the key to here is our grandfather was a master plumber. He made his living by being a plumber. There's a whole story into that, but the key here is that he was a master plumber. So he taught his three sons to do plumbing, and they essentially were master plumber skills, though they didn't go in that particular direction, but they had those particular skills. But my father taught my brother plumbing skills. Now, my brother didn't use a lot of those because things changed, and a lot of what he was taught is pretty much no longer existence anymore because some of the plumbing things have changed. If you think in terms of just the history of, say, refrigerators, that should tell you a lot about how plumbing in general has changed. But washing machines even. But somewhere along the line, my brother and I were talking about that, and I realized that my father had taught my brother plumbing school skills. And I was really surprised because, for one thing, well, I guess maybe when I was a kid, I didn't pay any attention to it. It was sort of like, okay, that's nice. I don't know if I had known that, whether I would have asked to learn. But apparently, this was all done, in a sense, out of my awareness. So I guess if my brother was being taught something, I don't know where I was because I was never really conscious that this was happening. And so I grew up never realizing that my brother had all of these plumbing skills. But the thing that got me was that my father never thought about teaching me. And my brother basically told me that that was because I was a girl. Girls didn't need to go into plumbing, which brought into a memory because I can remember, I don't know, maybe 8, 10, something like that. And my mother making a comment about my fingernails. And she's made the comment that girls should have nicely done hands, nice manicures, because that's, how to be noticed in a sense well, because a lot of people would look at your hands, and she didn't want me to have hands that had mess on them because that would tell people that I was something I wasn't. That stuck with me because it was like, so if my hands are dirty, does that mean that I'm dirty? What does that mean? Because that didn't make sense to me. Because to me, if my hands were messy, it just meant I'd been doing some work. It didn't say anything about who I was or what my capabilities were. But I remembered that specific conversation with my mother because it seemed so odd to me, which is, again, connected with the idea that my father and my grandfather would have taught me plumbing because I was a girl. It took me a few decades before it dawned on me that I didn't get those skills or those particular attitudes were aimed at me because I was a girl, because at that particular time frame, I wasn't expected to do anything like plumbing. The idea of doing a hands-on skill, a manual skill, would have just been important to my parents. I now realize I didn't realize it then, mind you. And so, in a sense, my circumstances around this particular circumstances, that being born and living in that particular family at that particular time, dictated a lot of my particular attitudes and what I thought I could do and what I couldn't do. This triggered something into the concept of somewhere along the line, and I'm not sure where. It might have been connected to the idea that I couldn't do plumbing, because it might have been connected with the idea that girls didn't do science. I grew up with the idea that I didn't like science and that I couldn't do it. I had a hard time in high school biology, maybe because I didn't want to dissect the frog and all that sort of stuff. So that was a problem. So that whether or not it was the idea that it was a science or whether I just didn't want to dissect the frog, I'm not quite sure. I'm never quite sure on those kind of details. But I remember growing up thinking that I didn't like science and I wasn't a scientist. Imagine my surprise when I was in college years and one of my instructors came over and asked me why I didn't major in chemistry. I thought he was out of his ever-loving mind. I remember looking at him thinking, are you, on drugs? Where are you coming with this? I was totally surprised. I probably was really kind of like not nice to him for that particular question, but it just completely floored me. I just couldn't understand why anybody would ask why I would be a scientist and why I would major in chemistry, because I was having a hard time with chemistry. Barely passed it, actually, to be perfectly honest. And I think the only reason I did pass the course was because the instructor, well, two things. A, he didn't want to have me in the lab the next year again. And B, because he knew I was trying. Because I kept doing things that he would look at things and said, I think this is what you did. Because I would do things and he's never quite sure what I had done to mess up an experiment. But anyway, so I don't think he wanted me around for another year. So I think I passed the course primarily because of that. I also did continue. My class started out in my school with about 60 people. There were about 15 of us at the end of the year. I was one of the 15. And again, I think he probably, because I stayed through it. It wasn't because of my grades and my understanding about chemistry. Trust me. Believe me on that. But anyway, with this in the background, I'm sitting there thinking, why is he asking me to major in chemistry? This took me years to figure out. And finally it dawned on me one day, and I'm not even sure how, that I am a scientist. I do like that thing. But somewhere along the line, again, because I was a girl, I wasn't raised to be a scientist. And all of that thing was totally out of my awareness and all my skill sets, because my circumstances were such that they were dictating about what I could and could not do. And I believed them. Well, I don't know if I could say I believed them, as I never questioned them. I think that's closer to the truth. And so there is why I'm talking about my particular stories today, is because I wonder how many of you have circumstances that you don't question that are dictating some of your specific things, that what you're doing today. Some of you may be saying, I'm not a good student. And that may not be true. It just may be somewhere along the line, in the same sense that I'm not, quote, not a scientist, or I'm not a plumber, that somewhere along the line something happened and you got told that you're not a good student because of some other circumstances. For all I know, you could have tried to do something in school and your parents or the adults around you didn't know how to do it. And so they basically put it on you because they didn't want to admit that they couldn't do it. Who knows? I don't know. I'm making that one up, but it's a distinct possibility. But what I'm wanting to ask you to think about is how many of your circumstances, again, let me go back to that quote. You are not your circumstances. Your circumstances merely happen to you. So when you start thinking about, well, I'm not good at this, I can't do that. Who want me do something like this? I can't do that. How many of those things that we have in our heads, because those are circumstances that we believed to be true about us, which aren't? And it's because of the certain set of circumstances, maybe because you're female and you got told that females can't do that. The idea just came to me, which I had totally forgotten about until I said that, is that I've had some electrical issues, in fact, this week. But anyway, that's beside the point. I may explain that at some point. But the woman who came to the house, actually a female electrician, came to the house and did some electrical work for me. And I have to admit, I was a little surprised about, not a lot, but a little surprised. And I wonder how many people would probably turn her away and think that she was incapable or incompetent because she was a female. Electricians aren't supposed to be females. They're supposed to be men, right? At least according to some people. But again, that's another set of circumstances. In this case, it seems to be more that you're female, then you can't do things because you're female. But there could be other circumstances. Maybe you were born in a particular location and, Northerners can't do this, Southerners can't do that, Westerners all do this, whatever. there might be certain circumstances that you're being labeled and people believe because of X, Y, and Z. I I believe this is true because I've heard it before, but I don't know anything about it because I've never really questioned it. But I understand that Dolly Parton once was said something about, does she get upset because people say blondes are dumb? And she says no, because it doesn't bother me. But then again, I also know that I'm not blonde. People were saying things about Dolly Parton because of A, where she was raised, B, her accent, and they said that she's, quote, a dumb blonde. If dumb blondes could get that kind of money, I'd like to be a dumb blonde, okay? But how many of those circumstances are we accepting as ourselves? And are we telling ourselves? And are we limiting ourselves because we're not doing anything that we may want to do or we may try to do simply because we believe in those particular circumstances instead of thinking about what we can and cannot do? So you might want to think about what circumstances are dictating to you and what your beliefs are that probably are not true. And give some thought to it, because maybe if you keep getting a nag, a mental nag from yourself about doing something, and you keep saying, I can't do that, is there a circumstances because of the way you've been brought up that's telling you you can't? And you might want to challenge that someday to find out whether or not that circumstance actually is true or not. Okay? Does this make sense? So again, I hope that some of my stories helped you think in terms of what you may be thinking about yourself. Let me know whether you liked it or didn't, or whether you want me to stop, or if it was helpful. And if it was helpful or you thought so, send it to somebody else and let me know what you think about it. And we will talk to you again later at some point. Bye.